Welcome. You're listening to the Just Pete podcast, where you'll be meeting some pretty amazing people, hearing their stories, and giving advice on how they've been going about maneuvering through life in healthy and more positive ways.
I gave you fair warning, beware. I gave you fair warning, beware.
It is Friday night, and I'm sitting here with Henry Rodriguez.
Rodriguez, sir. Rodriguez.
All right.
It's 11:13, people, and we have had a couple of beers.
A couple beers, and we just had a nice dinner that Henry made.
Yeah, damn right.
Thank you, Henry. It was delicious.
It's my pleasure.
What do we have? We had rice.
Beef, eggs, everything was in there, man. I threw everything I found in the refrigerator.
Oh, everything. All right. So yeah, this is really exciting. I've been wanting to do some podcasts and been meeting some really cool people and some great people, I feel, in my life, and I wanted to ask them questions and let the rest of the world and other people know about them, inspiring people and people that I care a lot about and want to get to know better as well. So I know Henry from doing martial arts. We have a group that we meet up with. We get together on Sunday mornings and we call it our fight church. But yeah, let's just get it going. How about it? Should we just get it going?
I'm game. I'm here.
All right, cool. Can you introduce yourself? And however you want to do that, that'd be great. I'd love to know more about you.
Well, that's always a difficult question to ask because I believe that there are different dimensions to me. So I'll say my name is Henry Rodriguez. I'm a fairly new transplant to Los Angeles. I moved here from New Jersey, and here I am. As opposed to most of the people that live here in Hollywood where I live, I'm not in show business by any means. I actually came to California because of the weather and the rich, very rich martial arts community that resides in Los Angeles. So I wanted to take advantage of that. And other than that, I'm just Henry. That's all I can really say about me. So I was born in Guatemala a long, long time ago. And in a galaxy far, far away. And I grew up, while I grew up very poor, I had an enviable childhood. Kids nowadays, I believe, they have everything, so they don't have the opportunity to play with their greatest tool, which is their imagination. I grew up using my imagination because we didn't have toys. So it was my brothers and my sisters, and we would create these scenarios where we would play. One day I was out playing with the kids from the neighborhood, and I heard my mom calling for the boys, because the boys were the ones that were out playing. And we, as we were supposed to, we came running, hoping we didn't catch a beating that day. So, and we said, "Yes, Mom, what do you want, Mom?" And she said, "Get your stuff ready. We're leaving for the U.S." We embarked on a trip to the United States of America illegally. We traveled from Guatemala through rural Guatemala, through the jungle, into Mexico, through Mexico, up to Tijuana, where we crossed the border into San Diego. And we managed to cross the border. Then they put us in a van and they drove us to Los Angeles. This was in 1989. My dad, who lived in the States at the time, he didn't know we were coming. So from Los Angeles, my mom called my dad and said, "Hey, I'm here in Los Angeles and I have all the kids with me."
Whoa!
So if you thought that you were gonna be one of those people that abandoned their family, guess what? You're wrong. We're here. So my dad did whatever he had to do and sent the money for plane tickets. And we flew from Los Angeles to New York City, where I grew up in Brooklyn. I think we moved from one apartment in Brooklyn to the other every year or so. And eventually in the early 90s, things got very expensive in New York. So like many other families in New York, my family decided, okay, we're moving to Jersey. So we moved to Jersey. Like any teenager, that was rough because I had to leave all my friends. Whatever little friends I had to leave behind and move to Jersey. I finished high school in Jersey, still an illegal alien. All my friends were getting cars and getting driver's licenses, and I couldn't. So then I got a couple of jobs straight out of high school because that's what you're supposed to do. You graduate high school and then you go get a job. Construction, painter, roofer, whatever kept me off the streets. Then one day I got a job in Linden, New Jersey. They used to ship cars from all over the country. So my job there was to wash and park cars. And that was fine. I mean, during the summer it was hot. During the winter it was cold. But, it was a job. I was getting some money and that's all that mattered. At some point, they were going to lay me off. And I went up to the owner of the company, Mr. Mr. Rick LaForge, this old Italian, old school Italian guy. And I said, listen, Rick, don't lay me off. I'll do whatever you need me to do. So he looked at me up and down. I mean, here's this kid, from Elizabeth, New Jersey, which is probably not the best neighborhood in the world. Wearing the Timberlands and the baggy pants, shaved head. I used to shave my head back then. And he said, okay, Henry, come in Monday, wear a tie. Here's a kid that has never worn a tie in his life. So I went to the local the local store, and I bought myself a tie for, I don't know, $2. I showed up on Monday wearing my cheap little tie, and I said, here I am. What do you want me to do? So he put me in customer service. And for some reason, customer service came easy to me. Maybe because I've been good at bullshitting people. I'm not sure why. But so I had a lot of idle time. And during this time, I would play around with the computer. So I would call the IT department and say, hey, listen, my computer's broken. And they would say, Henry, did you do such and such thing? Of course, I would say, of course not. I would never do such thing. And they would say, yes, you did. And I would say, no, I didn't. But eventually they would get down to fixing it. While they were fixing it, I was paying attention. I was, watching what they were doing. And I picked it up. I got in front of a computer for the first time in my life, and it just made sense to me. So it wasn't long before I was in charge of their IT department in Linden, New Jersey, which was a very small office, but for somebody that didn't have any training, I'll take it, especially it came with a raise. I was happy about that. And then eventually on a Wednesday, they called me into the office, the CFO, and he said to me, Henry, the person that's in charge of the network in Dallas, Texas, they just found a tumor in his head. We need you to be in Dallas. To which I said, well, give me about 2 weeks to think about it. And he said to me, no, I need to know right now. Because if you say yes, then on Saturday you're on a plane to Dallas. So being the person that I am, I said, okay, let's go. So I, did whatever I had to do and I left. Texas was a very interesting place for me coming from New York and New Jersey. It was just a very country. People were too nice. Some of them were not so nice, but I did about maybe 5 years in Dallas, and then I outgrew the company because I believed that what happened was that since they hired me as a young kid, they were not willing to pay me for the work that I was doing. Mainly, I was doing the job of two people and making half as much as the previous person was making. I was faced with the situation where I said I could either go back home, because I was not happy in Texas. So I could either go back home, or I could go to California, where I've never been. So once again, I said, all right, let me go to California where I've never been. And when I came to California, it was a very easy transition because this company that I used to work for in Dallas had an office right here in Carson, California. On the low, I was flirting with one of the girls in the California office. I came to California. Girlfriend was already there. I became really good friends with her brother. It was an instant social circle where all I really didn't need to do anything. So we connected really well. After about a year and a half of being here, one day I woke up and I had maybe 20 missed calls from back home. All different numbers, but they were all from back home. So I thought that was weird. So I called each and every number back and all the cell phones were off. So my first reaction was somebody's in the hospital. I just don't know who. So I went to work, but I told my boss, listen, I don't know what's going on, but I may have to leave today because I don't know what's going on. Finally, one of them called me back and my dad had a heart attack. I hopped on the first plane and I went to be with my family during those tough times. And there was something inside of me that said, listen, it's going to be easier to forgive your family, your parents, your dad, for losing what you have in California than it would be to forgive myself for not spending enough time with them. I spoke to my boss at the time. It was a company in Compton, California. And I said, hey, listen, I got to go. My family needs me. So I left his office. And, he said he wasn't happy about it, but he understood. I left his office, and 15 minutes later, he called me back. And he says, hey, Henry, how about if I give you a job on the East Coast? And I said, well, you don't have an operation on the East Coast. But what he wanted was for me to initiate his operation on the East Coast. It was a great opportunity because I had no experience doing that. They were willing to put their money on me, and I never really thought about backing down from that challenge. So I went ahead and took the job, and it made it easier. Just get back home. I got a job. Yeah. I'm set. It wasn't long before we went from making nothing from the East Coast to making a decent amount of money from that operation. So it was successful, if you ask me. But I was not challenged. Sales is a lot like that. Once you learn how to sell, then you only keep doing the same thing over and over and over and over. The challenge is not there anymore. Eventually, I got another job, and I found my girlfriend in California took it really hard because one of the things that she said that I never forgot, she said when I told her I was leaving, she was upset, but she was upset because it didn't even dawn on me to include her in my plans. I didn't say, hey, move with me to New York. But the reality of it is that I was unhappy in the relationship. I was very unhappy in the relationship, and I always had been. Men tend to do those things, avoiding the discomfort of an uncomfortable conversation. Mm-hmm. We just stuff it through, thinking, at some point it's gonna get better, but it never does. It never does. It's as I've gotten older, I've understood that. But so. Eventually, I left. After that, I got yet another job. Now, this job was life-changing because I always had a little bit of an entrepreneur in me, but it wasn't until I saw a real entrepreneur doing it that I said, "Oh, I can do this. I can do this." It was great. It was a great bunch of people, very creative. It was a startup, so everybody had a different job, a bunch of different jobs, and it was just phenomenal. But I learned a lot from that guy, even though he drove me nuts, because a lot of every genius that you meet in his time, they're uncomfortable to be around for some reason. Either they don't speak the proper way, or they smell funny. And there are thousands of stories about geniuses that are just not acceptable. But then in time we realize, oh wow, how brilliant they were. But no one is known in their time or in their home as a genius until they're gone. I mean, you could take the smartest man living right now, and when he goes home, his wife calls him an idiot. That's just he has to leave his house and die off in order for them to become known as geniuses. That was this man, and he pushed me really hard to my limits, but having that spirit of not giving up, I would take on every challenge, and I think I did well. Unfortunately, that came to an end. I was actually on vacation in Guatemala when they called me and said, "Hey, listen, the company's bankrupt. Stay there as long as you want." But that really kicked into gear the idea of not wanting to work for somebody else anymore. And there's a process that goes with that. There's a process of, I don't want to work for somebody else. I don't want to work for somebody else. I don't want to work for somebody else. Until you do whatever it is that you need to do to eventually say, I don't work for anybody else. I came up with a bunch of ideas, just different ideas, different technologies that don't exist, or improvements to technologies that existed already, or putting together technologies to make something new. But what happens with every business venture is that you need startup money. You need startup money. In very few cases can you actually build something without having startup money. An idea is a great idea, but it's not a business unless you're able to execute it. I've gone through a couple of ideas, a couple of businesses that I try, and some of them are really wacky ideas. But at the time I thought they were great. At the time I thought, oh man, this is gonna change the world, but doesn't work for whatever reason. But I stick it through. How do you know? When someone first told me about YouTube, I thought to myself, what? People are just gonna upload videos? That's such a stupid fucking idea. Nobody's gonna pay for that. And I actually had the opportunity to invest whatever little money I had on YouTube, and I'm kicking myself in the ass right now. I eventually, after a couple of failures, I ended up, you lose all your money. You blow all your money on your ideas, because while you're investing your money in your ideas, your bills still are coming in. Your car payment, your insurance payment, your rent, your cable, whatever, they're still coming. So that's draining your pocket, and the money that you're pumping into your new business idea, that's draining your pocket. Eventually you run out of money. I got another job at this company in Carlstadt, New Jersey, and it was an easy gig. It was probably one of the easiest jobs I ever had. They actually, my coworker / supervisor actually came to me and said, "Work slower, you're making us look bad." After after 4 months of working there, I wrote my resignation letter on a cake. On a cake, yeah. I wrote my resignation letter on a cake, and I resigned. And at that point I was sick of corporate America. I didn't want to be part of corporate America anymore. So I took whatever little money I had, and I moved to Guatemala for a year.
Oh wow! You went back to Guatemala.
I went back to Guatemala. I always wanted to know what it was like. I always wanted to know what it's like to be around a bunch of me. Because here I'm always the Spanish guy, or the whatever you want to call it. If I'm amongst Hispanics, I'm the Guatemalan guy. I just wanted to be somebody else. Just somebody else walking down the street. But it turns out that it doesn't work that way either. That's just part of life.
What were you considering?
Well, see, at that time I was probably close to about 275 pounds. And the average Guatemalan is probably about 5'4".
Yeah.
So in Guatemala, I was this huge guy and tall. I tower over everyone, and you know how short I am. Yeah. For the record, I'm 5'7", so everyone in Guatemala is 5'4". Everybody looked at me and said, "Wow, this guy is huge." No, plus add the 275 pounds. That's a big boy.
Yeah.
But eventually, the money that I had ran out, and it was time to come back and back to reality. And so I opened a small software development company, which is what I do now. I work on different inventions, ideas. Hopefully one of them will work, and just keep on trucking. One thing that I forgot to mention, or after the whole incident where the company shut down and I was on vacation, I had put so much emotion and passion into that business, that I actually owned a small percentage of. Once they took it away, I had nothing. I actually found myself in a deep depression. And that is what I have come to call Henry's Great Depression. I got down like all of us do, but I think I got a little bit further than most, but not too far to where I was to where I would jump off a bridge or something. But I was actually planning my suicide and how everything was gonna be. I mean, I wasn't thinking about it. I was planning it, and that's a whole nother level. That's saying, okay, I'm ready to do it. How am I gonna do it? But I used to live on the second floor of a house, and my sister used to live on the first floor. And my niece and my nephew used to come upstairs all the time. And my thought was, I can't do this because I can't kill myself in that way, because then my niece and my nephews are going to be the ones that are going to find my body. And that's when it hit me, where the reality struck, that moment of clarity that I said, what am I thinking? What is this that I'm thinking? Turned on all the lights and turned on the television and started making some noise, and came to the realization that I was in a deep depression. Obviously, a guy that doesn't have any money doesn't have health insurance, so that was out. I figured, you know what, I'm gonna have to nerd the shit out of this one, and started reading and understanding in a book on top of book on top of book. Understanding depression and what I was going through, and how that affected me. I managed to get out of my depression and start living again, and understand that I was dedicating 90% of my life to work, and 10% to personal, and that includes family, that includes love life, that includes everything else. That's a lot to cram into a 10% life. I made the decision that I was only going to dedicate more on my personal life than on my professional life. I mean, I at that point, I had already achieved everything I wanted to achieve in my career. I didn't want to have a big corporate job. I didn't want to be president or chief information officer or whatever company. I just wanted to have a happy personal life. Less work life and more personal life. And, along with that came a lot of understanding about myself and what I wanted and what I didn't want. I ended up losing about 100 and something pounds trying to just be a better person, a better me. Being a better person is not something that you do once. That's something that you do every day. And every day, you might find something else that you need to tweak, but that's what it is, At the end of the day, hopefully everybody else in the world is doing the same. They're trying to be better people and find their own happiness, because that's what you're doing. That's what I'm doing.
Not a lot, but you mentioned like the money running out, and then you'd come back. It takes a lot of tenacity, or a lot of faith, or a lot of courage to do that, because a lot of people, I like to use this word a lot, complacency, but a lot of people, they live their life and they're always trying to meet their ends, or make their ends meet, or trying to live paycheck to paycheck. What mindset, or what kind of because at some point you must get to that point where you're just pennies,
well, just being an entrepreneur, entrepreneurs are weird people, man. By default, thinking a different way. I mean, I've thought about it. How easy would it be for me to just get myself a 9 to 5, or get me a job that will just pay the bills? That would be easy, but because the entrepreneurial mind is so different to any entrepreneurial mind, that's a scary thought. The thought of, okay, I'm just gonna go work 9 to 5 and let them treat me whatever way they want to treat me and do whatever they want me to do. That's a scary thought. One of my bosses, the one in Compton, Mr. Philip Choi, he said to me at one point, he said, and I quote, "Henry, you're too creative for your own good. You can't work for anybody else. You need to do your own thing." Because what happened was that we had a process and nobody was looking at the inefficiencies in this process. I put together a plan to eliminate this process and just a new one. I made this whole flow chart and diagram about how my plan was so much better, trying to take initiative. So he took my work of art, as it were, crumpled it up and threw it in the garbage. And he said, "Who told you to work on this?" I said, "Nobody, but it's a problem." He said, "Well, I didn't tell you to work on it. I can't have that in my company, just everyone doing whatever they want to do." While I understand his point, I thought to myself, wow. But eventually, he pulled me to the side. He actually took me out to lunch to get some good pho. And he said, "Henry, listen, what I did back there was wrong. I'm sorry. But you gave me that idea in front of your coworkers. And if they start thinking that kind of mentality is going to work, then I lose control of my company." And eventually we did put my idea into execution, but I understand what he did. But a real entrepreneurial mind can't work under that structure. You're constantly seeking inefficiencies. You're constantly seeking something to make better, because see, that's what happens. I believe entrepreneurial minds, it's not necessarily an ambition. You just find inefficiencies. Your brain just finds inefficiencies, and if nobody else is doing it, it's up to you to do it, and then it becomes a business. Simply put, a real entrepreneurial mind will continue to. It doesn't matter if you run out of money, because I've done it. I've run out of money. Go get another job, put enough money together, go get it. And then, I've actually gone out and gotten money from investors to fund your idea. If the idea doesn't work, then it's an investment. Even though in some cases, I've paid back the money that I got from investors, because I know that was a stretch for them. But in reality, it's an investment. It's not a loan, Right. But you try to do the right thing. You try to do the right thing, or at least what you feel is right in your heart. So anybody else would say that was foolish of me because that was an investment. But in my heart, I'm happy with that decision. They invested X amount of money. The business didn't work out, so I went and got the money and I paid them back because that's how I felt. But I think that anyone who has that mentality, it doesn't matter. You and I have talked extensively several times, and I'm always percolating. I'm always like, okay, I could try this, or I could try that. You just got to keep trying. My focus now has changed a little bit to more of a try to help the world a little bit, in any way that I can. I'm not that ambitious when it comes to those things. I think that every little bit helps. Would I like to change the world to a better place? Yes, I would love to. The people that have the power to change things are the ones that benefit from things being screwed up. So, try to convince them to change things. It's not an easy task. And I've come to the conclusion, you know what? We all have to try to do our best. And that's just that.
So you mentioned that moment where you were contemplating suicide, and then how your nephew and nieces, right? Essentially, like, their presence made you feel like, yeah, you can't do this. You could have gone somewhere else and done it. Like, you could have gone to, got on a plane, gone somewhere and done it. Well, you did say that triggered something in you,
Right. Well, see, that's why I refer to those moments every now and then. Life or the universe or whatever you want to call it gives you those moments of clarity, because instead of coming up with a different idea of how I could do it,
which I don't encourage, but I'm just throwing it out there, just being real here.
It's just I had a moment of clarity and I could see things clearly for that moment, and it was like, Henry, what are you thinking? You shouldn't be thinking this. Instead of, because it had come up, I had a couple of ideas before that, which was like, okay, okay, ladies and gentlemen, the following is going to be a little bit graphic, so if, yeah.
It's all right.
It's okay.
We don't have any censorship.
All right, so I was thinking, okay, if I hang myself,
keep it real.
Right. Like, if I hang myself, well, there's not enough space in between the ceiling and the floor, so, like, how am I gonna work this out,
Also, the math was off.
Right, the math was off. The math just did not add up, and I'm for one, I'm not gonna kill myself with horrible math. I came up with a couple of ideas. Like, I could slit my wrist, but that might be too gory. I don't want my mother to be the one that finds this. The last idea I remember was pills. I was gonna take all these pills, but then Sammy and Geraldine, my niece and my nephew, are going to come up and try to wake me up, and I'm not gonna wake up, and that's their memory. And that's when it hit me. I said, Henry, what are you thinking? You can't be thinking like this. You call it whatever you want to call it. Every now and then we are gifted with these moments of clarity. But what happens is that some people are like, instead of seeing it through the eyes that I saw it, because I had the exact same objection before, but at that moment it clicked that this was not something I should have been thinking about. The mind is such an amazing thing. It's such a beautiful thing. It can create so much, but it's a very dark place when it wants to be. And I think that the majority of my struggle, if we want to call it that, is trying to dominate my mind. But it's a wonderful place to be, because I used to be the one that wanted to control everything outside of himself. Right. Oh, this is wrong, that's wrong, that's wrong. Oh, why are people doing everything the wrong way? But then you switch and you say, you need to change. You need to change this about yourself. You need to think differently. You need to act differently. You need to, even the way you love, it needs to be different. Because I used to think that love was one thing. It turns out that it's something completely different. At least, you know what? I'll be happy with saying that that's my interpretation of things now. It's I don't claim to have to know things or anything. Everything I speak of is my interpretation of things. So your interpretation of an entrepreneur might be different than mine, as well as whoever may be listening. Your interpretation of love may be different than mine. I think that at the end of the day, when you take all those things and you boil them to their bare minimum, it all involves passion. Because you love with that passion. You get involved in any endeavor and apply passion to it. It's just a matter of focusing that passion or that energy into a more positive way of doing things.
I think this is a great introduction to a great. Well, this is the first podcast
Wow.
I've done. I woke up this morning and we started talking, and it was like, you know what? If you'd be down to do this podcast, let's do it, and it'd be the first one.
Yeah, I popped his cherry.
Nice. So I really appreciate you taking this time and sharing. I think that let's do this. I have one more thing to ask you or add, but I say let's do this again, and then the next one we do, let's tap into kind of where you're at today and how martial arts has made an impact in your life, and we'll talk more in depth than that. For the viewers, for myself, but for everybody, why is it important? Because I tell you, I'm also on this path of like positive thinking, inspirational, goal-driven, focused, love, compassion, and I think one thing that you have down probably since you were little is selfless. And that's a huge character trait of yours, which I really admire and I appreciate. And I've noticed that ever since I've known you, ever since I've met you, you are very selfless. You have no problem offering help or friendship or patience. And I think when you're talking about like what you did for the fact that you chose not to end your life. Because that's something that I'll definitely quote it later. But a good friend of ours, Orpheus Black, said, people forget that we have that choice to take our life.
Yeah, we definitely do.
And so the choice that you did not, but it was a selfless act. The fact that you chose not to do it because of who would find you. Why do you think it's important to be that? Like, I mean, it may be very cliche answer, but I mean, I think it's just important for people to hear. I think it lines up with a question that my best childhood friend that did a podcast with me, Matt Ness, said that he wanted to hear from me my point of view on how I am so giving for love, and how I don't have a hard time sharing love. I mean, sometimes I get myself in trouble for being so genuine, but that's the choice that I've made.
Especially where we live.
Especially where we live. Exactly. Especially where we live. So I'm just curious, like, what inside Henry, because we're moving past the Henry's Great Depression era. What words could you share with our viewers, with our listeners? Like, why is it so important to care? Why is it important to be selfless?
I keep finding, and I keep testing it to be truer and truer every day. It's an age thing. We get to a certain point in our lives where we realize what's important and what's not important. And maybe it is because we don't have money that we realize that money is not important. But if we look at all those people that have all these great amount of money, they keep saying money's not everything, money's not everything. Unfortunately, in order for you to discover that money's not everything, you have to have money to be able to get over that hill. But I keep noticing that people around my age, they keep running into the same thing, that's not important. And what's ironic and a little unfair, but it's ironic, is that a lot of these things that I believe in, that I practice now, it's ingrained in women. So if we only listen to women from the time we were 3 years old, things would be so much better. Life would be so much easier. Men, we have this, and I've said this before, toxic testosterone or whatever it is, where we screw things up. Women from the get-go, they want to heal. Well, most of them, they want to heal. They want to love. if we look at our history, nurses are historically women. You know, it's not men. And why? It's not that I don't think it's men that said you women do this. I think that women naturally wanted to nourish, and in a world where they weren't given much power or equality, you know, they were still willing to, you know, I mean, they're mothers. I'm just catching on to what's been around us for since forever. The love, I mean, if we just take time to love each other and embrace each other and accept each other for whoever we may be, life would be so much better, so much easier if we helped each other. If we could just get over ourselves and stop worrying about what I need, you know, start thinking, okay, what's good for everyone? You know, I think that would make a better world. I tend to have this very silly belief that if everyone did what I wanted them to do, this world would be so much better. But, you know, Congress is filled with men thinking the same way. Personally, I'm still selfish. You know, all these things that you say, you know, they're selfish. They're not selfless. You know, because I feel like I want to live in a better world. And what better way to make a better world than to try to make it yourself? So, you know, it's very selfish. I don't think that there is such thing as a selfless act. There isn't. You know, but if in the process of being selfish you do good, what's wrong with that? You know, I want to live in a better world. I want to live in a world where we treat each other with respect, regardless of what we are and who we are. Where we love each other, take care of each other. You know, there's nothing wrong with that. You know, but for some reason that's a sin in some places. But you know, it's not. There's no such thing as. I mean, a lot of people have tried to understand selflessness. There's no such thing. It's selfish. You know, I want to live in a better place. Now you can call it karma or whatever, but at the end of the day, if in you trying to live, or let's make it personal, in me trying to live in a better world, I do good things, where's the harm in that? You know, versus me trying to live in a good world and doing bad things. I'd rather do the good things, and I have faith that things will, you know, just work out just fine. And I think that to some degree we could all use a little bit of that naive, childish faith that things will be just fine. You know, if we don't have that, this is a scary place to live in. You know? So I just hope for the best. You know?
Well, I think that's a nice way to end our first podcast interview with Henry Rodriguez. Thanks, Henry, for doing this, and we definitely will do it again, and we will continue, and we'll learn more about Henry's journey with martial arts and how that's been a part of his life, or if not a major part of his life. So you have anything else you want to add, Henry? Or?
Well, personally, no. I think it's always guys. If you don't know Pete, Pete's an amazing guy. He's just great. And every time I hang out with him, I get to learn more and enjoy more and just bask in the joy that he is being around. So if you get a chance to spend some time with him, say hi, and just, you know, love each other, guys. That's all I ask of you. That's all anybody can ask of you, and please do a lot of that. Love each other, left and right, up and down. Henry Rodriguez, over and out.
You've been listening to a Just Pete podcast. Thank you to our listeners, and we look forward to our next session together. If you'd like to find out more information regarding this podcast or others, please go to www.justpete.org. All be inspired.